Live. I'm John Ramsey. I'm our marketing and social media guy here at TMS Global. And today, for this month's live, we're going to be talking training. And I have our director of training with me, Lori Drum. Lori, before we get too much into the talking about training, I just want to kind of want to let people know who you are, where you're coming from as the director of training, just to kind of give that context before we really get into it. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of
Yeah,
sharing that with us, that'd be great.
sure. So I'm Laurie Drum, and wow, where do you start that? My professional, ugh, my professional training. Um, my degree is, or start that again. My degree is education, curriculum, and instruction, and so I spent all of my professional career in the United States developing curriculum, doing instruction, and teaching in the classroom, and teaching other teachers. And then we found TMS Global. Back then, the Mission Society. And so we launched to Costa Rica, spent our time in Costa Rica learning language, and then moved to Peru. Spent 5 years in Peru working in a Quechua village in the mountains in the Andes, and then transitioned to Spain, where we've been for 12 years now. So we've been doing the cross cultural work for a really long time, 17 years with TMS now, and I became the director of training 5 years ago. So that's how I
Wow,
got here.
that's it's always crazy hearing those numbers. I'm like, man, it's 12 years since you've been in Spain and 5 years you've been director of training. That's crazy. Um, but it's been awesome. And I also wanted to make sure that we got that covered because you got a clock behind you, and we are streaming at 3 o'clock Eastern. It's definitely not 3 o'clock Eastern where you're at. So first, thank you for staying up late for work and hopping on here with us.
Absolutely.
Um, well, let's get right into it. So, why is training, cross cultural training, especially essential for cross cultural workers who are preparing to serve globally?
Ooh, that's pretty loaded.
Yes, it's definitely got a
You,
big answer, big
yeah.
question.
I think historically we've seen lots of people go out and do good things in God's name. However, doing good things in God's name without some kind of training and some kind of cultural understanding can not look so good in the end, especially for the people that you're going to work with. And so it's so much better to go out trained. Being an acceptable outsider is so much better than just being the know-it-all outsider who comes in and tries to change everything and enforce your ideas and your worldview on a culture and on the people that you're trying to love well and serve well. And so we don't want to offend our host culture. We don't want to push them away. We want to be able to bring the gospel, but bring it as good news. And it's not good news if you're offensive and abrasive and people don't want you there. So I think cross cultural training is super important because it's important to being able to stay and have people be interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, I love that. I love that terminology of acceptable outsider that you use there. Would you mind kind of talking a little more about that and what that means, where that's from?
Um, I think we're always going to be an outsider. Even though I've lived in Spain for 12 years, even though I speak the language, even though my neighbors consider me a part of this community now and their neighbor, I'll never not be American. I can't make that go away. That will always be part of who I am. As much as I can learn about this culture and learn how to fit in, learn how to live among my neighbors and talk with my neighbors and be culturally appropriate, I will never not be me. And to not be me would not be authentic. And, one of the things that TMS is big on is having integrity. To not be me and to not be an American would not be to have integrity, and it would be false of me. But being an acceptable outsider is different because I can always be an American. I can always be Laurie. I can always be who I am, but also be accepted by my neighbors and have everyone not notice so much that I'm from the outside. I'll always be from the outside, but they don't have to. Every move I make doesn't scream I'm from the outside. So, yeah, it's so special the day that your neighbor actually calls you the neighbor or says that you're more Spanish than you are American. Like, it's really a great feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Oh, it's like, yeah, you're an outsider, but it's not abrasive. You know how to behave, you know how to work and live in a way that's not gonna rub everybody the wrong way. So it's a
Yeah.
more, yeah, you fit in. You're not the same, but you fit in. That's yeah, I love that. Love that terminology. Um, so I mean, you're a cross culture worker and you've trained dozens, hundreds of people at this point in living and working cross culturally. Uh, what are a few kind of key challenges that you've noticed over your years of doing this that cross culture workers face, and let me tack a second part of the question on there. How does training help prepare them for those challenges? So, what are some key challenges they face, and how does training help prepare for those challenges?
I think I would say the majority of the challenges come from our own worldview and not understanding your own worldview. Um, you never realize how American you are until you get out of America. And then all of a sudden you realize how different you actually are from other people, or the way you think, the way you do things, the idiosyncrasies that we have in our culture that seem perfectly normal to us until we go somewhere else. And we see that over and over and over again. We saw it in ourselves when we went to Costa Rica, then again to Peru, then again in Spain. We see it all the time. But we see it in other workers too. I think the training piece comes in when we are very intentional about teaching about worldview on the front end before we launch people. And so helping people begin to identify and see and expect. It's an expectations thing. I know that I'm different. I know that I see time, for example, I see time in a very different way than my brothers and sisters in Peru did, or than my Costa Rica brothers and sisters did, or than Spaniards do. And all three of those are very different as well. So it makes me recognize quicker when I'm rubbed the wrong way by something about time, like when everybody's an hour late to something and it's irritating me. I understand my own worldview and can go, oh, there's my Americanness popping up. And instead of just being angry or being frustrated in the culture, I can recognize and name that's me. That's my worldview. I need to be a little more pliable and live in my culture better. Um, I think that's a really big one. Worldview, form, the form that things take versus the meaning that they take. We have a very specific way of doing things. We have a specific way of doing church, a specific way of doing communion or baptisms or whatever, or how you dress. And then you go to another culture and it's very different. And instead of saying, this is wrong, like, why aren't they dressed like X, Y, and Z? Why aren't they doing baptism the right way? Just recognizing this is a form, it's a cultural form. It's not wrong, it's different. If the meaning is still correct, we're good. And being okay with that. But unless you're taught that on the front end, and unless your expectations are set on the front end that you are going to see this, this might challenge you in the field. If you don't realize that on the front end, then when you do get to the field and that does challenge you, it's a little bit harder. So, gosh, there's so many things, John.
Yeah. Well, I love that you start with that point of being able to recognize where your own worldview is impacting your experience and what you're feeling at the moment. Um, I know I've found that to be really really critical when in cross cultural situations. Just having the awareness that that's a thing, and having the tools to be able to recognize it and kind of figure out what exactly is happening, where it's rubbing me the wrong way, so that I can be prepared for next time and also handle my emotions in that moment a lot better is really critical. Um, Real quick, just because I'm not sure how many people are watching right now, but if you're watching and you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and I will convey those to Lori, um, if they're good. I'm just kidding. Um, um,
Hey,
yeah.
can I jump back to that question just a
Oh
second?
yeah, absolutely.
Because those were things that, we talk about specific training topics that come into play there. But I think some of the challenges that cross-cultural workers face that maybe, they're not prepared for, and so we work really hard to make sure that they are, is just some loss. The loss of your own care network. People don't expect the grief and the loss to be as big as it is. And so when we don't shy away from that and we talk about that in training, and we talk about your relationships are going to change, they're still there. You still have relationships with your sending church or with friends and family or whoever, but they're going to shift and they're going to change. And that can be a real point of tension if you're not prepared and you don't expect that. And so we've tried really hard to prepare people on the front end because, proactive is so much better than reactive. And when you want to be proactive and understanding some of that. So yeah, that's a big one, I think. Again, there's just so many challenges out there that we try to be proactive on and set up in training. But
Yeah. Yeah, I love that point. And it's, I think in today's digitally connected world, it can be easy to kind of think, okay, maybe it's not as bad, right? Because surely we can still stay connected. Surely if I go across the world, I can still talk to my friends every week. But in reality, what happens is your life is different. Things are different. And that can certainly be an unexpected hit. That's really, really, really excellent. Um, so when we're talking about training to learn other worldviews, to recognize our own worldview, um, that kind of acquiring cultural competence, what how does that itself, beyond just like recognizing how we feel and being able to be friends and talk to people better, what are some ways that can help people specifically engage better with the communities they serve, beyond just like, oh yeah, I'm accepted now, right?
I think that we try to teach people to have the posture of a learner and to go in as humble learners. In fact, that's maybe our highest value, is to remain a humble learner. It doesn't matter to me how many degrees you have and how much you've done in the past. It does not matter to your neighbor in another country. They want to know that you're there to learn, and that that you have a curiosity about their culture, and there's nothing more honoring than to want to understand and want to learn about someone else's culture. And so maintaining that throughout your time, at however many years you've been there, maintaining that curiosity and that willingness to learn is so big. My grandfather was a university professor, and he always used to say to all of us, I, the man was amazing, but he always told us, the reason that you get a university degree is not so that you know everything, it's so that you learn how to continue to learn. And I so agree with that. And that's something that we've tried to really maintain in our training program as well, is how do you learn? I cannot train every single CCW on every single thing they need to know for the specific cultural context they're going to, but I can teach them how to learn and how to remain in that learning posture wherever they are. So while I may be able to tell you some things about Peru, or tell you some things about Spain or Costa Rica or any place that we've served, I can't tell you everything. And culture is always changing. So I can tell you about Peru 17 years ago, but that's not necessarily going to still be the same thing. But I can tell you how to keep trying to learn and to keep being curious and to keep observing and trying to understand a little bit more. I think that's the key, is understanding how to learn more and remaining in that place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's critical. I think that's part of what makes our training so successful and so versatile, right? Is that the focus is not, hey, let's talk you through the specifics of whatever culture you're going through. Like we have aspects of that um, in our preparation for cross cultural workers, but the focus of training, like you said, is maintaining that humble posture of a learner, um, really throughout your life, but especially in terms of going on the field. Um, it's kind of falling off of that. What are some of the topics? Like I know we do a lot of different trainings, right? Um, what are some of the topics that we really find are like really critical topics that we want to cover for people who are going to serve cross culturally in our training?
Oof. Um, I think we have 90 hours of training in our main piece of pre-launch training. So there's a lot. There's a whole lot of that. But scripture engagement is a big one, and it kind of goes back to that piece about you know CCWs or cross-cultural workers go out into the world, and all of a sudden there's maybe not a church or a Bible study group or the women's group or your small house group to help feed you. And so there's scripture engagement for how do you feed yourself, but then also how do you engage in scripture with other people where you are. So that's one of them. Cross cultural communication. If there's more than one culture in the room, I guarantee there's more than one way to communicate and things you need to know. So that's a big one. Concept of culture, theology of mission, theology of risk and suffering. Those are big. Self care. There's some team training. There's training on how to be a good cross cultural partner and have cross cultural partnerships, because we often pair our cross cultural workers with an international partner in another country. Right away you've got some cross-cultural issues, you've got some things you need to understand so that you can be a good partner and a good teammate with on a multicultural team. um, well, and there that brings up conflict, and we talk about the inference ladder, we talk about conflict management, conflict resolution, we talk about how to work on a team, team dynamics, spiritual warfare. Whew, I can't even think of them all right now. Discipleship.
Quite the gamut.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's a lot.
And
Incarnational ministry. Ooh, there's no way I can say 90 hours worth of training right here on this.
yeah,
But
we only have a limited time. Um, maybe sometime we'll just stream our whole intensive training. How about that? That'd be great.
that's dumb.
um, okay, so I know this is I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway because I know it's one that's near and dear to your heart as a trainer and educator. When we train people, when we do the chant, we have people in person doing this. What does it look like? Do we just have people sitting in a room behind their desks taking notes? What do we have going on there? What does that look like?
Absolutely not. No, I really believe in experiential learning and in lots of engagement. So, not only do we make sure that that's what's happening in the classroom, but we have a facilitators training program where we train all of our trainers to be very engaging, do lots of experiential learning. We have lots of activity as well as lecture. So I don't want it to feel like sitting in a big university classroom where there's 300 people and it's just lecture. We have lots of conversation, we have lots of table group things, we have activities that we do. Um, Really the beauty comes out in those conversations and in the community that's built in the room. I really want us to lean into not only learning, but learning together. We're a relational organization. We're going out to do relational work, and that relationship building starts in that room. So we spend a lot of time really trying to build community and work through these things and wrestle with them together. We need to be able to wrestle with them, with those tough topics with each other before we go out and put them into practice. And so having all of those activities is really important to me. I do not want people sitting on their behinds taking notes and getting bored. That's not happening.
Yeah, and I love it. It's a fun time teaching and learning at, at our trainings. You mentioned the facilitators, and you've done some pretty cool stuff in the last 5 years, especially with putting together facilitators and training facilitators. Would you mind kind of sharing a little bit about how that all works? Who we have as our training facilitators, how you put that together, and yeah, just kind of
Yeah,
generally what you have going on there.
thanks. Um, we have, ooh, I think we have 18 fully trained facilitators right now. All of them have been in the field and have been cross cultural workers for various amounts of time and in various contexts. So we have people who've lived in Kazakhstan and Russia and, um, gosh, I can't remember where half of them are from. India, Spain, the Middle East. We have people who've lived all over the world. So they're not only coming at it from the theoretical knowledge um, base, but they're coming at it from we've been there, we've done that, and we know what it looks like in the field. So the amount of actual expertise in the room is amazing. I really love it. But over the last few years, we've worked really hard to train these people not only to be able to impart that wisdom, but in what we just talked about, in the experiential learning stuff, in the best practices for how to be trainers, and to build that community in the room and what that looks like. So I love it. In fact, right now, one of the things that's really coming to fruition and I'm really excited about is all of these trainers means that we can be in several places at once. So we're sending a training group to Kenya in October to train 40 Kenyans, Ugandans, and some other people that I'm not even sure which African country they're from at this point, because we're not in charge of the on ground piece. We're sending a team over there to do training for them. At the same time, we're sending another team to Ecuador to train some cross cultural workers in the jungle. So we have that capacity built, and we have this solid curriculum and knowledge base where both of those groups of people are going to get the exact same training with the exact same quality on two completely different continents at the exact same time, because we've built this capacity in. So I love it.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. That is amazing. And kind of on that note, so we've got these trainings that we're doing. What do the trainings look like? Like what kind of stuff do we have? What do we put people through when they want to be a cross cultural worker with us, or if they're like, hey, we need people trained? What does that look like?
Tell me more about that question.
Yeah, something like I know we have our intensive training that we do over the summer. We have one coming up next year in Central America. Can you just talk about like what does that look like overall?
Okay, well, so in the beginning, when people are first approved to become cross cultural workers with TMS Global, and this is for people who are going as workers with TMS Global, they come on and they go through a cohort based training for several months. And they'll be online, kind of like this. We do some training online with people every week, and we talk to them we go through some of the more onboarding kinds of things, also training them how to do their partnership development and how TMS works, what certain things they need to know just to get started. Then we have some required reading things. We have online learning for some online learning modules to get them going until they can go to that intensive. And that intensive is mostly what we've been talking about the really good, deep, hard stuff that we need to get people trained in before they can launch. Um, so that basically, over that process of a year, more or less, gets people trained and gets them launched. Now, once they're in the field, we have ongoing learning so they can come back in. We have workshops. We're always putting workshops out there for people, not only through us, but through other people who we partner with. We make sure that our cross cultural workers who are in the field have access to what's being offered. What are the new workshops? What is the new training that's coming out? We also have cohorts all the time that are happening online within the org for various things. We have a cohort on aging parents, where CCWs, cross cultural workers who have aging parents, come together every month and talk about what's that like and how do we care for our parents well while we're living on the other side of the world. We just finished a book club group where we talked about a book, Ordinary Discipleship. And we had several cross cultural workers from around the world getting together, talking about this book every week for a month. Lots of things like that. But also, people come in and they get engaged with training when they're not going out as cross cultural workers. So, this last year for our summer intensive, we had some people come in. We had an executive pastor come in and take the training alongside cross cultural workers, which was great. We had a mission director come in, take the training alongside cross cultural workers, the exact same training we give everybody else. She's gone back, she's gotten her church super excited. They're changing their outlook on how they do international missions and how they're getting engaged. And it's just been really amazing to see people in the US who are interested in missions or have various ideas about I think God might be calling me to do something with missions, but I'm not sure. And we've plugged them in. Why not? Let's plug them into the training and see what happens. And so Yeah, we've had a couple of visitors come in like that who have wanted to see what the training's like, take the training, and then have gone on to become cross cultural workers because they loved the training. And so they applied to TMS and came in. It looks like so many things.
Yeah, how often can you say that we had some people come in and take our courses and now they want to work with us full time? Like that's I think that's pretty cool. Not gonna lie, that's pretty cool. Um,
I think it I think it kind of goes back to that intentionality around building community in the classroom and the way we do that. So you can't you can't help but fall in love not only with the topics but with the people you're in the room with, and then you want to be a part.
yeah, that's really good. And kind of on that same thing of that community, like what are some of the things that we do? And I know you already said, you have the cohort and stuff, but what are some of the intentional choices that you as the director, as the person who's kind of setting things up for our intensive training, what are some things you do to facilitate and help form that sense of community during that time?
um Yeah, so I talked about cohort learning, which I think is really important. We used to not do it as a cohort. We did it as a 1 week intensive. We just brought people in, got that training, one and done, do it for a week and it's finished. But what we found out, and that happened because of COVID, we had to change the system. We couldn't bring everybody in for a 1 week thing and do it the other way. And so, because of COVID, we designed this plan to go into a cohort system and meet every week for a period of time. And then they also began to get connected to each other in deeper ways because when you meet over and over and over again, you start to talk about each other's kids and you start to pray for each other in different ways and you start to be concerned for each other in different ways, and that community builds. And then when they would come together for the intensive in the summer, they already knew each other so deeply. And we could go deep into our curriculum so fast because we didn't have to spend those first few days trying to build community and build relationship and do all of the icebreaker kind of things to get to that point. We were there and they were already deep with each other in each other's lives. So there's that. There's having we have an online community and we have prayer together all the time, and we have just ways for them to connect during our intensives. We have a high value for the hospitality that's going on, and so we have a hospitality team that's doing things with people. We're making sure that we're being really intentional during training to have game night or to set up morning hikes together, or those things don't sound like they have anything to do with training, but in the end they do. We want to be as intentional about building community and relationships as we are about training people to go and be cross cultural.
Yeah, yeah, I love that, and I love what we've done because I've gotten to participate in several of the intensive trainings. I really have always appreciated how the schedule has been set up to intentionally create time to build and strengthen the community and the relationships of the people that are there. I think that's really cool. It's not just like, hey, we're gonna be filling your heads in the classroom from sun up to sundown. There's space to breathe and process. There's space to um, have fun. I personally place a high emphasis on fun. Um, but yeah, I just I've always appreciated how that has been set up, and I think it's really been effective. Um, so were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was. As you were talking, I was thinking about, I think one of the really big pieces of that intensive training that I haven't even touched on yet, because I don't lead it. We just make sure there's space for it. Um, we have a program for our children of our cross cultural workers. the TCK program. So it's third culture kids. And those kids are getting the same curriculum our adults are getting, just on their level. And so at the same time, the adults are in the training room doing all of the training things. The kids are in their own training room going through the same kind of curriculum, those same kinds of topics, but at their level and preparing them to live cross culturally because we value these kids. We want our children to have the same experiences and be ready to go live. They're not just add ons to the family, they are part of the family. And so we need to make sure that that's happening. And so while we're doing our thing, they're doing their thing and they have that same tight bond and community. I have a daughter who is a TCK, and I don't know how many of these intensive trainings she's been to at this point because she always ends up going with her father and I to be trainers. Um, but her bonds to the other children in TMS and the other kids that she's been through training with are stronger than any bond she has anywhere in this world, including some of her family. She is closer to the TCKs than she is to anybody. So I love that program, and that's an integral part of our training. If we didn't have that, we couldn't do what we do.
Yeah. And as a TCK myself, I also certainly appreciate that, and appreciate that perspective. It's such a holistic view of this isn't just the grown-ups going and kids will figure it out, and kids are resilient, they'll be fine. Like that's caused a lot of pain over a lot of years, and so it really is beautiful and really important that we have that, as a high priority. And that, again, it's not babysitting. It's not just let's put your kids in and watch VeggieTales all day. It's real training. And actually, I'm excited. At the beginning of December, I'm going to be talking to Carrie, who heads up our TCK program, on our next live. We'll be taking we're taking October off, but yeah. So we're gonna get into some more TCK stuff in a couple months. So hopefully people will come back and check that out and have some questions for us. But yeah, that's so crucial and so impactful. Um, yeah. So let's see. I got a couple of questions here. Again, if anybody has questions, please drop them in the chat. Questions about training, about how we do it, why we do it, who does it, any of that. We would be happy to have that conversation. We talk resiliency, right? I just mentioned that. I know talking about TCKs and resiliency. I know within the sphere of cross cultural worker training, resiliency is a common theme and a common term that's talked about. Would you mind talking a little bit about resiliency and how training impacts that for people who are on the field?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess I want to unpack a little bit what resiliency means. It's we don't have a question of if something hard is going to happen. Living cross culturally is hard. Regardless of whatever happens, living cross culturally is hard. So we want to prepare people for that and we want to set those expectations rightly. So resiliency is really the ability to stretch. Think of a rubber band. So you want to be able to stretch, but not to the point of breaking. You want to be able to stretch, and your stretching is actually great. Stretching is growing. We want people to stretch, and they're going to be stretched, but we also want you to go back. We don't want you to stretch to the point that you break or that you stretch and then you pop. We've all popped a rubber band, right? We don't want to stretch to the point that you pop. We want to stretch and grow, but then we also want to be able to go back into shape and bounce back and keep moving forward. And so resiliency for cross-cultural workers, I think it's super important because those things are going to happen. life's going to get tough. Your visa's going to be crazy and not get renewed on time or whatever. So many ways that cross-cultural life can go sideways. But if we prepare for those things, if we've taken good care of ourselves, I talked about we have self-care as one of our training topics. If we understand risk and we understand suffering, and we're not talking about the false narratives around risk and suffering, but we're talking about the real thing. If we understand all of that, then it's easier to go through tough things and name them and realize this is normal, this is okay, I can do this, and come back through it. Or if it's not normal and it's not okay and it's really hard, we've also prepared you to know who to reach out to, where to get help, what you need to do in that situation. And we make those plans ahead of time. The time to make those plans is not in the moment. And so, all of that being said, we're setting those expectations up front and helping people realize, for example, culture shock. Culture shock's a real thing. Culture shock is going to happen. It's not if it's going to happen, it's when is it going to happen. And it might happen early and it might happen 2 years down the road, but you're going to hit it. The trick for resiliency is going to be when you hit it, can you recognize it and go, whoop, this is culture shock. I'm not going crazy. Everyone around me is not out to get me. This is culture shock. And being able to name it and come back through it. Or having the people who are around you, if you're on a team, if you're with a spouse, someone can name that for you and help you and go, remember when we learned this? This is normal. We're going to get through this. Or if it's not normal, we know how to get help. It's okay. So I think awareness is a big thing. Awareness and being able to recognize it. And you can't be aware of something if you didn't know it in the first place. So we're making it known on the front end so that it's easy to be aware of it when it does come.
Yeah. Love that. And again, so important. Really everything in the training is just absolutely crucial. And I think it all a testament to the work you've done and the work that people doing training at TMS have done before you even. It's really been put together in a way to kind of holistically both care for the cross-cultural worker and what the cross-cultural worker is doing and the people that around the cross-cultural worker. It's really this very holistic approach, and it's really cool. I think we're gonna probably wrap it up here in a second, but real quick, if somebody was watching this and thought, man, I really want to get some of this training, what would be the process for that? Just email you? Would that be kind of the thing here?
They can certainly email me. They can email me. We have all kinds of things available that are training. We have some training things online right now, some core training videos. So we can drop that actually maybe in the comment section or something later. Yeah. We have a short-term team training manual for people who are trying to do something like that, like to take a team somewhere. Please get some training. Some of the same stuff that we're talking about is what we train short-term teams on, and how to go out and do cross-cultural work well and understand. So that would be a way to get some of the training. TMS has several things that we do. We have a pastor's vision cohort, which actually does some of these same training pieces. And then again, just contact us. Maybe you can plug into some of our intensives or some of our things that we're doing. We'd be glad to have you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lori. And thanks again for someone's in their motorcycle, I guess, near. But thanks for staying up late and hopping on here. Really appreciate it. Yeah, well, that's it. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a good evening. Lori, have a good night. Thanks.
Thanks, John. It was fun.
Yeah, you can stay on here. Yeah, stay on here for a second.